So this is a siddur. It's a prayer book, and basically it kind of Jews have used this for many, many years, and it's prayers that they would recite on special occasions. So what I want to do tonight is read through some of these prayers that they have for Hanukkah and show how even the sages prophesied of the coming Messiah and how it relates to Yeshua. Before we light the shamash, I'm going to read in English what the prayer would be over beginning to light the Hanukkah. So this is a Hanukkah. This is a menorah. A Hanukkah has 9 candlesticks, and the regular menorah has 7. And in the temple, you would find the regular menorah, but this is commemorating Hanukkah. So I'm not going to read the Hebrew because I can't read Hebrew that well, but I'm going to read what it says in English. And it says, "Blessed are you, Yahweh our God, King of the universe, who has sanctified us with his commandments and commanded us to kindle the light of Hanukkah. Blessed
Which
are
really
you."
isn't a commandment, but
Right, it's not actually a commandment, but this is what they would. This is what they would say. He said, "Blessed are you, Yahweh our God, King of the universe, who has wrought miracles for our forefathers in those days at this season. Blessed are you, Yahweh our God, King of the universe, who has kept us alive and has sustained us and brought us to this season." And I want to highlight that word miracles. Blessed are you, Yahweh our God, King of the universe, who wrought miracles. And what this art scroll siddur says, a note on that word miracles, it says, "For the miracles, for the wonders." The word miracles refers to the obvious acts of intervention by his divine providence. This word can also mean banners or signposts for God's miracles. For God's miracles are meant to be signposts and symbols that stand out to teach and guide us. So they even recognize Hanukkah being a banner or a signpost to teach us and guide us. And we'll see in the coming prayers, it's very messianic in what it says. But before we light the shamash, and you can get ready to do that, I'm going to read one scripture. It's Isaiah 11, verse 10. It says, "In that day, the root of Jesse will stand as a banner for the peoples. The nations will rally to him, and his resting place will be glorious." So here we see that the root of Jesse, Yeshua, stands as a banner or a signpost or a miracle. And so it's a direct correlation to what we see here with Hanukkah. It's even a signpost for us to look to Yeshua to come. So Robin, would you mind lighting up the shamash for us? And as you're doing that, I want to read a little bit about what the shamash is. The shamash is the servant light. It's used to light all the other candles on the Hanukkah. The candle in the middle, which is the shamash, is lit first and used to light all the other 8 candles. It's called the shamash and is set a little higher than all of the others. You can see that this candlestick is a little bit higher than the rest. The shamash means servant. This is a picture of Yeshua. Mark 10, 43 through 45 says, "Whoever would be great among you must first be your servant, and whoever would be first among you must be slave of all. For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." John 12:32 says, "And when I am lifted up from the earth, will draw all people to myself." And John 3:14 says, "Just as Moses lifted up the snake in the wilderness, so the Son of Man must be lifted up." John 8:28 says, "So Yeshua said, when you have lifted up the Son of Man, then you will know that I am he, and I do nothing on my own, but speak just what the Father has taught me." We're going to read a little bit from Isaiah and get into the prophets. So it says, "And now says Yahweh, who formed me from the womb to be his servant, to bring Jacob back to him, so that Israel might be gathered to him. For I am honored in the sight of Yahweh, and my God is my strength." Well, remember that word strength because it's going to come out when we read the siddur here. My God is my strength. He says, it is too small a thing that you should be my servant to raise up the tribes of Jacob and to restore the preserved ones of Israel. I will also make you a light of the nations, so that my salvation may reach to the end of the earth. Thus says Yahweh, the Redeemer of Israel and its Holy One, to the despised one, to the one abhorred by the nation, to the servant of rulers. He says, kings will see and arise, princes will also bow down, because Yahweh, who is faithful, the Holy One of Israel, has chosen you. Behold my servant, whom I uphold, my chosen in whom my soul delights. I have put my spirit upon him. He will bring forth justice to the nations. He will not cry aloud or lift up his voice or make it heard in the street. A bruised reed he will not break, and a faintly burning wick he will not quench. He will faithfully bring forth justice. He will not grow faint or be discouraged till he has established justice in the earth, and the coastlands wait for his law. Thus says God, Yahweh, who created the heavens and stretched them out, who spread out the earth and what comes from it, who gives breath to the people on it, and spirit to those who walk in it. I am Yahweh. I have called you in righteousness. I will take you by the hand and keep you. I will give you as a covenant for the people, a light for the nations, to open the eyes that are blind, to bring out the prisoners from the dungeon, from the prison those who sit in darkness. That was Isaiah 42. And I'm going to read one more scripture from Isaiah. It's Isaiah 53, verse 11. It says, out of the anguish of his soul he shall see and be satisfied. By his knowledge shall the righteous one, my servant, make many to be accounted righteous, and he shall bear their iniquities. So we see, like from the prophets, that the righteous one, Yeshua, the Messiah, in whom the Spirit of Yahweh rests, is the servant. And we see this in the Hanukkah, as it's lit first and is used to serve all the other candles. The servant is lifted up higher. We know that Yeshua is our high priest, right? Hebrews says he's our high priest. But is he our high priest according to the Levitical priesthood, or does it say according to the order of Melchizedek, right? And Melchizedek means righteous king. So the Melchizedek priesthood is not just a priesthood, but a royalty. And that's why through Yeshua we're a royal priesthood too. So he is our high priest according to the order of Melchizedek. And if you go back and look at Melchizedek, he presented bread and wine to Abraham after his battle. He presented that. And so you're looking at Yeshua, what did he say that he is? His body is the bread broken for us, and his blood, wine poured out for us. And we know that the temple menorah was of hammered or beaten gold. And we know that he was beaten for us, and he was also crushed for our iniquities. But what would be crushed? Well, how do we make olive oil? We have to crush the olives to extract that oil out, right? So if you remember when Yeshua, before his crucifixion, where did he go to pray to the Father? He went to the Mount of Olives, right? Right? And so he was right, and so and in that time he cried out to the Father, and they say that he even bled tears of blood, right? And so he was literally crushed into the depths of his soul for us. And so I want to share with you Leviticus 24, verse 2, regarding the temple menorah. It says, command the children of Israel that they bring unto thee pure olive oil, beaten for the light, to cause the lamps to burn continually. So in the temple, the oil was supposed to burn continually, right? And so if that oil stopped, that was a big problem. And when Antiochus Epiphanes IV desecrated the temple by sacrificing a pig on the altar, and Judah Maccabee kicked him out, and they had those battles, when they rededicated that temple, legend says that they only had enough oil for one day, but the oil lasted all the 8 days. And so that's where you have the what we consider the miracle, or the banner or signpost of Hanukkah. And so I see Yeshua as being that crushed olive oil crushed out for us, and he is what brings the light to the nations because of that. He submitted his will to the Father. And so being crushed as an olive, you're completely submitted to the one who is doing the crushing. Isaiah 53 is where it 53 verse 5 says he was crushed for our iniquities. And we know that lamp was hammered of gold. I want to share another thing about when Yeshua was crucified. It says in Luke 23, verse 44 and 45, it was about the 6th hour, and there was a darkness over all the earth until the 9th hour. And the sun was darkened, and the veil of the temple was rent in the midst. So remember that phrase, in the midst. But I do want to share that it was darkness, and the shamash is the first candle to be lit, and therefore the first to go out in our traditional way of looking at Hanukkah, right? And so we light that until it goes out, and we know that Yeshua was the first fruits from the dead as well. In other words, he died for us, but he was also the first to be raised into incorruptible flesh. And he sets the way and is an example for all of us. The veil of the temple, if you look at the temple as representing God or the body of God, the veil would be torn as if God was weeping and rending his clothes and tearing his clothes and mourning at the death of his son. And Yom Kippur is the only sacrifice a year that would be to atone for all the sins of Israel, including the high priest. And it was the only time when the temple would be open to reveal the Holy of Holies from the sacrifice that was made. And so when Yeshua was on the stake and he was being crucified, and that temple curtain, which was more than a foot thick, was torn in two, it opened up that Holy of Holies to fulfill the Yom Kippur sacrifice. So if we go back to that Melchizedekian priesthood, when Abraham followed Yahweh, it says that in Genesis 15 that he had a vision, and that God actually walked that blood path for him. So God took all the animals and split them in two. What's interesting about that is that there was a bull, there was a ram, there was an ewe, there were turtle doves. And so all of these animals were part of this covenant, this blood covenant of the pieces. Robin's going to talk about a covenant of salt in a minute. But the covenant of pieces, all these animals are represented. If you look in the Torah, those are all the animals that are used in the sin sacrifices. Each for a particular purpose. The bull or a red heifer would be for the high priest or a king, right? And so then you have the ram for males, and you have the ewe for females. And then you have turtle doves for those who can't afford a lamb or a ram. And then it goes even further, 1/10 of an ephah of grain for those who are very poor. But, Melchizedek gave bread as well. So you look at that picture, and it was a picture of Christ, because the Messiah, Yeshua, was the flaming torch that walked the blood path, and the other person who walked the blood path in the covenant was Yahweh, which was the fire pot. And so we see that Abraham didn't even walk the blood path, symbolizing, even right there, the gospel was fully preached to Abraham, that Yeshua would be the one to pay for our penalty of breaking that blood covenant. And so Yeshua took that on himself when he died. So before I go further, I do want to read a little bit more from the prayer book. And as I'm reading, just kind of glean what you can from these prayers. And I'm just going to read through it and make some comments. So the next one that they would pray says this: "These lights we kindle for the miracles, for the wonders, for the salvations," which is HaYeshuot, "and for the battles which you performed, for our forefathers in those days at this season, through the hands of your priests, who are holy. All 8 days of Hanukkah these lights are sacred, and we do not have permission to make personal use of them, but to look at them only, in order to express thanks and praise to your great name, for your miracles, for your wonders, and for your salvation. Yeshua. And here the note here says about not having permission to use this for personal use. It says, we do not have permission to make personal use of them. It is forbidden to use the Hanukkah lights for any personal purpose, such as reading or doing work by their illumination, lest one slight the mitzvos, according to them. The prohibition against enjoying the lights makes it manifestly clear to all that they were kindled for the sole purpose of commemorating the miracle. These are solely for commemorating that signpost, or remembering Yeshua, as we see it. In compliance with the prohibition against enjoying the lights, we light a shamash, literally a servant, flame, which is not holy, so that any incidental pleasure that comes from the lights can be considered as coming from the shamash. Any joy that we receive because of the gospel is from the servant, Yeshua, not from anything that we have done. And it's by his sacrifice that we are sanctified and justified. And then he says, in order to express thanks and give praise to your name, by refraining from utilizing the Hanukkah lights for anything but the mitzvah itself and contemplating them while they burn, we make it apparent to all that our intent is to publicize the miracle and to praise God's great name in acknowledgement of his great miracles. Following the kindling of the lights and recital of Haneros Halalu, it is customary to recite the following zemer. The author's name, Mordecai, appears in the acrostic of the initial letters of the first 5 stanzas. It's apparently composed in the mid-13th century. In the zemer, the liturgical poet recalls various exiles the Jewish people endured, praises for God redeeming us from each of them, and praise for the restoration of the temple and for the dawn of the Messianic redemption. So they're looking forward to that new temple and Messianic redemption. We see the resurrection of Yeshua even as a symbol of that Messianic temple being restored in perfection. So then I want to read the next one, and we're getting close to the end of the prayers. But the next one says, O stronghold, rock of my salvation, to you it is proper to praise. Restore the house of my prayer, and there a thanksgiving offering we will bring. At the time when you will prepare the slaughter of the foe who is bellowing, then I shall complete with a song, a hymn, the dedication of the altar. With troubles was my soul sated, with grief my strength did he consume. My life they embittered with hardship, with bondage of the kingdom, compared to a calf. But with his great power he took out the treasured nation. The army of Pharaoh and all his offspring went down like a stone into the deep. Thank you for the festive song. To the abode of his holiness he brought me, but also there I did not rest. For along came an oppressor and exiled me, because foreign gods I served. The wine of bewilderment I mixed and drank, almost did I perish. At the end of the exile in Babylonia, Zerubbabel came. At the end of 70 years I was saved. To sever the lofty height of the cypress, sought Haman the son Agagite of Hammedatha. But it became for him a snare and a stumbling block, and his arrogance was stilled. The head of the Benjamite Mordecai you lifted, while the enemy, his name you blotted out. With his numerous progeny and his possessions upon the gallows you hanged him. The Greeks gathered against me. Then in the days of the noble ones, the Hasmoneans, they breached the walls of my towers and defiled all the oils. But from the one remnant of the flasks, a miracle was wrought for the roses, Israel. Men of insight, 8 days they established for song and jubilation. Bear your holy arm, and hasten the final salvation. Avenge the vengeance of the blood of your servants from the nation that is wicked. For long delayed for us is salvation, and there is no end to the days of evil. Repel the red one to the nethermost shadow. Establish for us the 7 shepherds. So, a couple notes on this. I don't know if you caught some of the awesome little blurbs in there. But, he says, with grief was my soul sated. And, that Yahweh was pleased because of the suffering, the grief of his servant. his son Yeshua. He says, my life they embittered with hardship, with bondage of the kingdom, compared to a calf. So, because Yeshua took our bondage in Egypt, which is a symbol of our bondage to sin, just like a calf was slaughtered, Yeshua was slaughtered for us and was able to restore us. And then they go on to talk about the head of Mordecai was lifted while the enemy he was blotted out, referring to Haman. We know Haman is representative of anti-Messiah, anti-Christ. But Messiah was raised from the dead, and he was lifted up and glorified, where the enemy one was cast out and put to shame. Yeah. So everything is speaking and fulfills everything that Yeshua was to do. There's so much good here, but I want to read one little note, and this is their commentary on that. There's one part it says here, it says, and this is where they cry out for their salvation. It says, bear your holy arm and hasten the final salvation. Hasten the final Yeshua. It says, bear your holy arm. This final stanza is generally regarded to be a later addition by a different author. The initial letters of the first three words form the acrostic, be strong. Hazak. And I don't remember where it was that I said to remember that, but earlier I said remember, be strong. And since it contains a strong plea for divine vengeance against Israel's foes, this stanza was subject to much censorship by Christian authorities. Accordingly, some Siddurim have replaced certain stitches with others less offensive to the censors. Okay? So, Yeshua is that holy arm of Yahweh, right? We all know that. And he is our strong one who is able to bring about our salvation. And then they also say the red one refers to Esau, or Edom, whose descendants brought the current exile. So it says, avenge the vengeance of the blood of your servants from the nation that is wicked, for long delayed for us is salvation, and there is no end to the days of evil. Repel the red one to the nethermost shadow, to establish for us the 7 shepherds. It says the red one refers to Esau, whose descendants brought the exile. So, because of whose sin was all mankind considered to be subject to death? Adam. What does the Hebrew word Adon mean? Red. And then look at, it says the 7 shepherds from Micah 5:4, who will conquer Israel's oppressors are David, Adam, Seth, Methuselah, Abraham, Jacob, and Moses. Who is the mediator between God and Israel at the time of Sinai? Moses. Yet we know that there's only one mediator between God and man, the man Yeshua HaMashiach, right? So what does that scripture mean? If Moses was a mediator and Yeshua was a mediator, then we have 2. I think it means that there is only one mediator in the Melchizedekian priesthood between God and man. Ultimately, Yeshua is the Melchizedekian high priest. But we know that Moses wasn't of the order of Aaron, right? Right? So he couldn't have been of the Levitical priesthood. Yet Moses was a mediator.
Well, Aaron was his brother.
Right.
He was a Levite, but he wasn't
A
priest.
He
Right.
He wasn't a Cohen.
He could not have been a high priest.
Right.
According to the order of Levi.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, Yeshua is in the same order as all of these men, these 7 shepherds. David, Adam, Seth, Methuselah, Abraham, Jacob, and Moses. So, even though they're not all Judah, okay? But we know that Yeshua was the high priest, and it says that his lineage was from Judah. So anyways, what I'm trying to say is that there's an interesting correlation between 7 shepherds, and I think the fact that there's 7 candlesticks on the menorah.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know what that means. I'm just saying I think it's interesting that they say that, and I believe that all these men were of the Melchizedekian priesthood. If you go back and look, Abraham made sacrifice.
He has a note on it on Facebook.
Abel, who was Adam's son, made a sacrifice. And this righteous line from Adam to Seth, Methuselah, who taught Noah and his family, right? Then down to Abraham, who is by legend taught by Shem, who was Noah's son, and passed down the righteous decrees and ordinances of Yahweh, basically teaching Torah before Torah was written at Sinai. Jacob and Moses. And then who came after them? David, who also made sacrifices, and his sons were said to be priests, and he was in charge of the whole Levitical system. And David was the one who also walked into the temple and took the showbread and ate of it. And he asked the priest if he could have it, and the priest made sure that he and his men were not defiled, and he gave them the bread. But that's where Yeshua says, I am master of the Sabbath, just as David was master over the Levitical priesthood because he was in the order of Melchizedek, a king and priest. Right. And Yeshua is our ultimate king priest, Melchizedek. And not only that, but when Yeshua went to the cross, he was our Passover lamb, right, which was the ewe. He was also a ram caught in the thicket because of the crown of thorns that caused blood to run down on it, right? And then he was also the red heifer, bull, who was slain and the temple was rent. And that red heifer, I believe, has something to do with the red one, because we know that Yeshua came in the likeness as a second Adam to redeem mankind from that fall, and Yeshua came in perfection, right? So, I believe that we should be really thankful for Judah and all the traditions that Judah has established. If Judah had not been faithful to maintain a priesthood, if Judah Maccabee had not have kicked out Antiochus Epiphanes and restored the temple, there would have been no John the Baptist. There would have been no purification process for Mary to go to Jerusalem and be purified. There would not have been, if Judah had been divorced from Yahweh like Israel was, then Yeshua would have been born out of covenant. Illegitimately. So we should be thankful for everything that Judah has done. And Judah should be the leader, but it doesn't mean that they own Torah. And so because of Yeshua, Judah will be made, I think, jealous of us because of what Yeshua can do. And there's one last scripture I'm going to share, and then I am done, and I'll pass it over to Robin. But that is Revelation 1, verse 12 through 16. And I'm just going to read that to you real quick. And I don't have any comments on it, really. I just want to read it and let you just let that sit with you. And I turned to see the voice that spoke with me. And being turned, I saw 7 golden candlesticks. And in the midst of the 7 candlesticks is one like unto the Son of Man, clothed with a garment down to the foot, and girt about the paps with a golden girdle. His head and his hairs were white like wool, as white as snow, and his eyes were as a flame of fire, and his feet like unto fine brass, as if they burned in a furnace, and his voice as the sound of many waters. And he had in his right hand 7 stars, and out of his mouth went a sharp 2-edged sword. And his countenance was as the sun shineth in his strength. And then it goes on to talk about the 7 assemblies. They are the candles. But I'm just going to leave it with that. And those are just my blurbs that I had for tonight. I just wanted to share that with you guys.
That's a blurb.
So thanks.
We're really looking forward to something serious.
Yeah,
That's a blurb.
awesome.
So that was, thank you. He has a note on Facebook.